Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. And today we're going to have our Take 5 with Stephen Travers show. Logan Landers is our producer and engineer, and I'm Harper LaBelle. And we start a little bit somber today, Stephen. I just found out a few moments ago that one of the baseball greats in Bob Uecker has passed away. Bob obviously was a broadcaster for the Milwaukee Brewers. He was a movie star in many different aspects of his entertainment career. He was the star of Mr. Belvedere, so movie and television, but he was also a pretty darn good baseball player. Maybe not of Hall of Fame status, but at least one of those guys that absolutely would deserved his spot on the roster for however long or for however he earned it. And his ability to make it funny and to joke about his career and be self-deprecating in a way that very few people feel comfortable with. Stephen, that's one of the first things that I take away is what a hero he was for the game of baseball.
Oh, my God, Bob Uecker. God bless this guy. I mean, wow, what an absolute gem of a person. And he was a truly skilled person in many ways, a skilled baseball player. Yes, a major leaguer. You're talking to a guy who played minor league baseball. Okay, I was a pretty good ball player, a good high school player, a Division I scholarship in college, played in the minor leagues, Cardinals and A's. I didn't get to the big leagues. Bob Uecker got to the big leagues. Okay, you don't get to the big leagues unless you're good. So a lot of that stuff that he said about himself is self-deprecating. No, he wasn't Johnny Bench or Tim McCarver.
Yogi Berra, right? Yeah, he wasn't Tim McCarver, right? But he played with him.
He played with them, and
he played with him.
The 64 world champion he always joked, "Oh, I led the 64 Cardinals to the world championship." But I personally, I met him once, and I mean, in a 10-second, 20-second conversation, it encapsulated who he was, how genuine he was. That there wasn't what you saw on or listened to on the radio or saw when he was on television was the real deal. And I got that in a very, very short conversation. I'm in the press box at Phoenix Municipal Stadium. I'm a columnist with the San Francisco Examiner. I'm there covering the A's. That was their spring training home. And there's Bob Uecker, who's the announcer of the Milwaukee Brewers. And I walk up to him. I extend my hand. I said, "Hi, Bob. I'm Steve Travers. I'm with the San Francisco Examiner. And I just wanted to let you know that I'm a big, big fan of yours." And this is how he replied. He goes, "Hey, thanks, buddy." And big handshake and big smile. And I don't even know if we talked much beyond that. But his reaction, was so real and genuine. And it was a friendly guy, and I think everybody who met him, fans, people in restaurants, they got that same reaction. It wasn't Steve Travers. It was everybody who met him was a better person and felt better for having met the guy. And my God, the things he said were so. He reminds me a lot of my friend Bill Spaceman Lee. And I introduced Bill at a USC baseball dinner a couple of years ago. And one of the things I mentioned was, I said, people call Bob Uecker Mr. Baseball, and I think he is, but I think Bill is Mr. Baseball too. Bill, a slightly different sense of humor, but the same is good, a sense of humor, timing, and just a comic. And I mean, Bob, Johnny Carson goes, "Who's your favorite ball player?" He goes, "Well, Johnny, it had to be, this is deadpan, right? It had to be Babe Ruth." And Carson goes, "Sure, the Babe was a great ball player, hit a lot of home runs." And Bob goes, "Well, that too, but you had to admire the fact that the man drank a lot, And he would, he'd say that he would deliver these. He didn't, laugh at himself, and he would deliver them. Carson had him on more than anybody else.
Yep.
And Carson, they always said, if you look at his show, there were times when he would literally fall under his desk. He would lower his body to the point where his head was down or near or below the desk. And he said it only happened with certain people. And it happened a lot with Bob Uecker. He just loved Uecker. Carson couldn't believe it the first time, I think it was 1969, someone recommended Bob Uecker to be on his show. He was like, who's Bob Uecker?
Yep.
He'd been in the big leagues he actually probably been in the big leagues for 7 years or so. Cardinals, Atlanta Braves. And, do I really want this guy? Well, of course, as soon as he came on, he was immediately absolutely hilarious. I love he's talking about signing with the Braves. He's a native of Milwaukee. And he goes, well, the Braves and my father entered into negotiations for my first contract. And my dad came out and he said, look, I just can't afford to pay that much. He goes, I reported to the dressing room at Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, and the manager of the team, Luman Harris, pointed to a sign and said, personnel only, you're not allowed to be in here. These kinds of things. And so, my gosh, yeah. And an actor, and his performance in Just a Bit Outside, let me see. Today's game is brought to you by, the hell with it. And then he's, drinking up.
Yeah. Real quick, Stephen, the Johnny Carson thing helps in the building of this legacy, because as you mentioned, Johnny didn't know who he was. And Johnny had all kinds of people that before they went on the air, he didn't know who they were.
Yeah.
But Bob was one of those special guys that very quickly, I think he cracked the code, and he didn't. Here's one of the things that I was going to say. If you ever could say anything about Bob Uecker, all of his jokes, he never cracked a smile.
No,
he never laughed at anything.
Yeah.
He was so good at his material that he didn't need to laugh to help you to laugh. Some comedians have to do that, or they catch themselves, and it's so funny that they break up. That's fine. I love it. Robin Williams, when he starts laughing at his own jokes, I know it's funny because now he's admitted it by him laughing. But Bob didn't break that. But Johnny and Ed and even Doc on the sides, if you can make Johnny laugh, that's a special person. And what you're telling me is that Bob was able to do that and then do it repeatedly. So Johnny had him on all the time. And guess what? So the network of executives said, we got to put this guy on the air, because if Carson loves him, maybe the rest of America does. And that helped launch his acting career. Fair enough?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Being on Johnny Carson in those days, this is before cable television. This is what you watched. Everybody watched Johnny Carson. I mean, high school kids watched Johnny Carson. And he's talking about comics laughing. I was recently seeing something with Will Ferrell, and he was cracking himself up. Sometimes you laugh at your own stuff. I think probably if you look at a lot of movies and stuff, these guys crack themselves up and they have to do retakes. But when Uecker was on with Carson, they didn't really, those were live shows. So he had to have that demeanor, and it just was, but, outside of that, when he was just in conversation with people, when he was on the air, he laughed a lot. He smiled a lot.
Yeah. That was arms all over, big handshake, exuberant enthusiasm in the conversation like he had with you personally. Absolutely. But there were certain times where he was in character, and absolutely amazing. Logan, real quick, let's get your thoughts, because you don't go as deep and far back because you're a much younger person. What was your first encounter with even knowing who Bob Uecker was, or what his affiliation was with the great game of baseball?
Well, I mean, Stephen, you touched on it. It was his role in Major League in those films. Growing up, just watching as many sports movies as I could. Major League was a great one, and obviously him being the voice of it, right, and all the one-liners he had, that kind of introduced me to him before I got a little bit older and started learning more about just the broadcasters of baseball. And I mean, my God, for him to be in one spot from what was it, 1970 through last season as the voice of the Brewers is very impressive. Like you said, he was just what a personality, right? There's a reason that he was more than just a baseball broadcaster. He branched out into acting. He did a little bit of wrestling too in the 80s and 90s with Andre the Giant and had a goozled in the backstage area. I mean, just a great personality. What an entertainer also, right? You never saw him and didn't, crack a smile, even cry at times, just because of how he conveyed his emotions and whatnot, and just what a person he was. But God, I mean, we could have a whole show just looking through all the different comedic bits and one-liners that he had over the years. I mean, just probably up till until last year when he was broadcasting Brewers games, he was still just cracking jokes like usual. And just the outpouring from the fans that I've seen. They'd go up to Miller Park, and he has a statue there, rightfully so. But there's flowers there. Someone has an unopened Miller Lite can right at the end of the statue. So I think that that's just fitting. I think he would have loved that. And it's unfortunate we lost him, but he lived a great life. And my God, what a just a special person, and countless moments. I mean, you can go and watch any of his calls on YouTube or anywhere. All the countless Brewers, pretty much all the big moments that they've had throughout their history, he's been there for every one of them, it feels like. So just a special person, a great broadcaster. But man, what a funny person Bob Uecker was, and he'll be missed. That there's no doubt about that.
You mentioned the major league. Can you think of any line outside? Because he had several really cool and funny lines in that movie. Obviously, just a bit outside. It is going to that he'll be known for that. That is the hook, in my opinion, to Bob Uecker. That it's almost like the Christopher Walken episode of Saturday Night Live when he was on, and he was the production engineer. I wish I could remember his name. I used to know it, and forgive me, but when he did the cowbell scene with Will Ferrell, years later, he was on stage, Broadway show. Will goes to the show. He gets backstage. He gets to meet with Christopher. He had known him, right? They'd worked together before, so he gets backstage. But this is after cowbell. And Christopher Walken looks right at him, and he has this weird stare in his face. He goes, he's saying this to Will. Christopher Walken to Will Ferrell, you've ruined my life, Will. You've ruined it. I can't go anywhere with anybody asking me to do the cowbell line. And so Will takes that as, a badge of honor. Right. And I think the badge of honor amongst many with Bob Uecker is just a bit outside. But I'm going to throw another one at you. And thank you for bringing up the light beer from Miller commercials. He made those, he and Madden, in my opinion, because when he said, must be in the front row, that is one of the classic lines that outlasted that stupid commercial. And yet all of those many commercials that Bud Light did with Dick Butkus and Bubba Smith, and then you throw Madden in, throwing his arms around. And Stephen, you'll remember these things. When we saw him for the first time, it was almost like the Super Bowl commercials. We couldn't wait for the Budweiser Clydesdale and the light beer from before the Frogs, the light beer from Miller commercials that they had. They were absolutely outstanding done. And the guys were just joking and laughing around. They were all two sheets to the wind anyways. And then they bring in Uecker and make it even funnier and better.
Yeah, all the scenes you just described for Major League are being shown on Fox News right now. So,
yep, absolutely. Because there's so many of them. It's not just that one. There are other little parts in that movie where he has a great comeback.
Yeah,
these stupid little situations that they put him in.
I mean, I was at South Bend last year and accidentally was with my friend, and we accidentally sat in the wrong seats, and somebody came by at the beginning of the game, said, "Hey, these are our seats." What did I say? Must be in the front row. I mean, how many times do you say that? I know Charlie Sheen. He was telling me that when they were filming Major League, he said it was a good thing that I wasn't in the same scenes with Bob, because when Bob was on set, you couldn't get any work done. He was so funny. Everybody was laughing. eventually you almost had to put a moratorium on Euchre. Says, okay, we got to get this scene done. He said if he was working with him like he was with Berenger with a lot of one-on-one scenes, he might not have been able to do that movie. If he could hear Euchre doing the broadcast as he was on the mound, he would have cracked up. He wouldn't have been able to deliver the pitches. Oh my God. I mean, yeah, you could go on. And I go back all the way to Monday Night Baseball in the 1970s. And this is probably, he was the announcer for the Milwaukee Brewers, I think Logan said 1970. So he was an announcer, but it was probably the Carson mystique that promoted him to Monday Night Baseball, which started in the mid-70s, 74, 75, something like that. And he was really great at that. And let's also, the simple fact is, as funny as he was and all that, he was a truly great professional baseball announcer.
Yeah.
He had an absolute flair. Of course, he was a player. He had a flair for the big moment. So he knew when to say, and the Brewers have won it. Oh, the Brewers are, he knew when to be excitable. And he also had that. Vince Scully talked about this. He was, if you're ever listening to a game and the team's losing 9-1, you want Bob Euchre to be on, because that's when the stories, because you got to fill in that time. Your team is losing. There's nothing to, but you're listening to a Brewers game. How many people were probably driving around greater Milwaukee for the last 30 years, listening to maybe a Brewers game, a lackluster team perhaps, and a game that doesn't matter much, but they didn't turn the radio off because they were listening to Bob Euchre. The same thing, I always felt that way with Scully. I didn't even care what the score of a Dodger game was. I'm listening to Vince Scully. So.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, Stephen. There were times where he would go into a story about Drysdale or Koufax or Johnny Roseboro or Pee Wee Reese.
Yeah.
And I didn't care what the count was to Ron Say at the time. I wanted him to tell me what the story was before they had to go to a commercial break. I would imagine Bob had the same impact on the Brewer listeners where, hey, remember that time when Robin Yount and Paul Molitor, they had a little bit, too much to drink at the golf course. And I was there, and here's a 3-2 pitch to Smith. And I could care less about Smith. I don't want to talk about him. Finish your story, Bob. Oh my gosh, that's the certain magic that radio back in the day used to have, where you're describing in ways that you have to articulate it so that people can see through your words. And Bob was good at that. Don't get me wrong, but to be able to get Howard Cosell to laugh.
Oh my God, yeah.
And the challenge, and I'm sure in the back of his mind, he's a sneaky little dude as well. And he'd go, I'm going to say something tonight. I'm going to get Howard to break up. And I wonder if he had a bet with his friends to see how he could work that out.
He's at the Hall of Fame. He's being accepted. He's going in. And Robin Yount is in the stands. And he says something like, I want to acknowledge the presence of Robin Yount. Of course, I taught him everything he knows about baseball. He's the reason he played so long, and is also a member of the Hall of Fame. And he says this deadpan. My favorite also, he says, the old Connie Mack Stadium in Philadelphia. I used to love being in the bullpen. Well, why is that, Bob? Says Johnny Carson. He goes, well, there was a little a door that was right next to the bullpen, and it led to a street outside, and there was a little bar there. I'd bring a few bucks in my pocket and go have a pop every once in a while in the 5th inning or the 6th inning when I didn't think I was going to be needed. And, it took the edge off. I think he was serious.
Yeah.
I've heard stories like that. Bill Lee's told stories. Bo Belinsky. There's players who've talked to me about certain old stadiums. This is, you never see this anymore, but some of these old stadiums had some of these little trick passages where you could go to, it's a little bar that was next to it. I mean, baseball's a long season, and there's a lot
for him to do the that there's no way that could happen, or that would be impossible, or no one would ever leave the bullpen to go have a beer. And for him to throw that in, and the way he did it, just so matter-of-factly, that he made it amusing to where young and old, and it was clean. That's the other great thing about him. It was clean, and it didn't matter who you were. You could put yourself in that same situation and go, "There's no way," but yet Bob did it, or knew somebody that did. And there's no way he had anything to do with Robin Yount's success, but yet he took credit for it. That's what made it funny. So again, self-deprecating in a way that was just classic. What an amazing guy. Logan, I think I interrupted you. You were going to add something.
No, and going back to what you were saying, Stephen, with him, accepting his Hall of Fame nomination going into Cooperstown, one of my other favorite quotes from that, he's like, "Well, I thought I was going to be going in as a player today, but that just didn't work out." But yeah, just tremendous, and so many, like I said, so many stories just that you've heard over the years, heard him tell. Just the way that he can put a spin on it, it's second to none.
Whenever like a funny person passes away, there's always someone will say, and I'm sure someone's saying it today, they're laughing in heaven. And I really actually can sort of really believe that. That here's a guy and Babe Ruth and Hank Aaron are laughing in heaven with Bob Uecker and Jesus, and because I really do think there's the giving joy to your fellow man is such a gift, is such a wonderful thing. I think it comes from above, and I think that was certainly his gift. And boy, love Bob Uecker.
Wouldn't it be interesting to be in on that conversation? The greatest line, in my opinion, of Field of Dreams is when Burt Lancaster's character, Moonlight Graham, after he saves little Karen from the choking incident, when he has to go past the players into the cornfield. And the last guy to say anything to him was Shoeless Joe. He goes, "Hey, rookie!"
Yeah.
And he turns back. "You were good." And imagine in heaven where even a guy like Ty Cobb would walk up and pat Bob Uecker on the shoulder. You know what? You made the game more fun.
Yeah.
You made it better.
Yeah. If
I enjoyed watching what you did to make the game better. And one of the great thrills of my life, it was actually at a funeral. So forgive me for making it sound like the funeral was the thrill. But Dave Baker, who was he was in charge of the Football Hall of Fame at the time. Here's this big 6'9", 380-pound dude. You know who I'm talking about, I hope everybody. He's the guy, if you need to go find Dave Baker, go look at the Bill Cowher or the Jimmy Johnson Hall of Fame induction, where he goes on the set with those guys while they're on the air, and they kept it a big secret. But Dave Baker's, one of his great lines that he gave to everybody, and he gave it to me. I introduced myself. I said, Dave, I can't say enough about how much I appreciate all that you've done for the former players, that joy that they get when you knock on the door, that genuine thrill that they know you're gonna induct them. You're the one giving them the news that they're going to get into the Hall of Fame. For you to deliver that, thank you. And he looks at me and he says, No, thank you for what you've done for the game and what you will continue to do for the game. We thank you. And he said that to me, so that was the greatest honor I could ever get. And Bob Uecker probably gets something very similar for all that you did as a player, yeah, but as a broadcaster and a person to continue the game and get others to like it as much as you do. That's a special magic, guys. It really is, and Bob had it.
In spades.
No doubt about that.
All right. Well, that's my emotional and yet very true tribute to someone who made the game of baseball a heck of a lot better than it was before him. So one of those genuine, real, true people that you just want to clap your hands, tip your hat, and just say thank you, young man, for everything that you did. So Bob Uecker passes away today, 90 years old. What a great thrill it was to be a part of his life in so many different ways. Stephen got a chance to meet him, but the way he entertained so many of us and made us laugh. We start the show with that. The rest of the show, we're going to talk a little bit about football. We're going to get serious now with the college football playoff finals Atlanta gets to host the game. It's on ESPN, Stephen, at 7:30. Ohio State has now gone from an 8.5 to an 8-point favorite. The money line is moving just a little bit, but I think everybody and their brother would say that if you're looking at just the talent and the type of player on each one of the rosters, can you be any better than what Ohio State has? Tight end, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, linebackers, they're just superior everywhere you go on the field. Give us your thoughts here about Ohio State.
Well, they're a $20 million football team. And I agree with what Vincent said a week or 2 weeks ago when he said it might be the greatest college football team ever assembled. And I have also said that Ryan Day has built this team as a playoff team. That is to say, it's now professional football, it's playoff football, it's Moneyball football. And so all that being said, I agree they should be favored by 8 to 10 points. They are a behemoth. But we talked about another game similar to this. In 1986, you saw Penn State versus Miami, and Miami was very much like Ohio State this year. Lots of future NFL players, lots of size, lots of speed. They were the better team. They were highly favored. They did not win that game. So if there's a template for Notre Dame to do something, it's going to be holding Ohio State in the first half and somehow controlling the narrative of the game. Now, Logan and I were talking before we went on the air about an article that I read in the Wall Street Journal that said the key in college football, and this is probably the same in the pros, but this was a study that was done of college football, is the middle 8 minutes of a game, which is to say the last 4 minutes of the second quarter, first 4 minutes of the third quarter. And nobody does it better than Notre Dame. And these are, and we talked about the 1974 USC Notre Dame game. Okay, remember how that went. SC scores late in the second quarter. They go to the halftime. SC gets the ball to start the third quarter. They immediately run it back. You can have a period where you have the ball for the better part of 10 minutes if you are controlling it in the end of the first half and getting the ball to start the second half and doing another drive. And you can have a quarterback and an offense, $20 million worth of beef and talent that's just sitting there on the other side watching the other team control the narrative and control the clock. And that's how you can win a game. That's how a team like Notre Dame can win. They are not favored. They should not be favored. But they're there, and they've earned their way there. They beat Georgia, okay? They beat Georgia. That's the Southeastern Conference, my friend. And, we all know what that means. And so they've earned their way onto this stage. And I would, if they play it tough, even if they win, I'm not going to be surprised. There's still a little bit of that Notre Dame panache that exists out there. It's not 3 yards in a cloud of dust anymore. But that's, I think that's, what they can't have is for Ohio State just to run the table and just start, and next thing you know, it's a yard sale. Like what Ohio State did to Oregon. Cannot allow that to happen. You somehow are going to have, there's going to have to be a little bit of luck and going to have to be some, but they're a well-coached team. I hope they keep their coach. I've heard he's talking to the Chicago Bears. I don't know how that's going. I've also heard Pete Carroll's name there, but that's not college football. But they're both very well-coached teams who are built for this game.
So, Logan, taking what Stephen just said, what does Ohio State have to have? How do they shoot themselves in the foot? I don't think they will, but, it would take something like that for Notre Dame to take advantage of it. Here's another game that I'll throw at you, Stephen. How about the Texas Longhorns against the USC Trojans? What was that, 2006, whatever it was? There was no way that anyone was going to beat SC, but the little engine that could in Texas took the lineup that man for man, roster for roster, SC was as loaded. That would have been one of the great teams of all time. But Logan, real quick, Stephen, I'll let you respond to that in just a second. But that, because I know you have said Ohio State should win the game. They absolutely should. What would have to, what would need to blow up in terms of their game plan in order for Notre Dame to be able to say, you know what, we're going to take advantage of this and we're going to beat you today, not the other way around?
Well, for me, I think it's a couple of factors that if Notre Dame wants to win, they're going to have to capitalize on something that Texas couldn't last week. So those three factors is one of them that Texas did successfully do is they contained Jeremiah Smith. That only held to one catch the entire day. And obviously we know the field day he's had throughout these playoffs. So you're going to have to contain him. That's first and foremost because we know how talented he is. That we we know Ohio State has a crew of great receivers behind him that showed up in their game against Texas that also did some good work. But you got to at least negate the true number one option, right? So that's one of my first factors. The other one, too, is Ohio State struggled with penalties in that game against Texas. Had 9 penalties on the day. So if they can, have that self-inflicted wound, like you said, that can hurt them. That could, if they get a big first down, but they get a holding penalty, you bring that back, and that could change the momentum. So they're going to have to hope that, they maybe aren't as disciplined like they were against Texas. And another thing, too, is they're going to have to beat them on third down. Notre Dame beat Penn State, I would say, just based on third downs alone, and that's the big reason why they got where they did, and they won that football game. Notre Dame was 11 of 17 on third down, and Penn State was only 3 of 11. Well, guess who else went 3 of 10 in their game, but they won? That's Ohio State against Texas. So if you can have them, if you can hope they can get a couple of penalties against themselves, some holdings, some face masks, just careless penalties like that. You hope that you can contain the wide receiving core, particularly in Jeremiah Smith, and then see if you can limit their third down conversion. I think that's a good recipe because we know that Notre Dame is definitely a defensive heavy first. That's the first thing you think of with this team is how their defense is. But with their offense, they've shown that big play potential before. We saw with Jeremiah Love, I believe it was against Indiana, had that 99-yard touchdown where he took it to the house. So you can get a big explosive play like that. That's definitely going to help you out. And Riley Leonard, he's going to have to play the game of his life if they would have won this one. But I think that Notre Dame has a better shot than some people are saying.
A lot of great points there. And Stephen, I'm going to follow up with one. I agree with what Logan's saying, but I'm going to go down this rabbit trail with one of them, Jeremiah Smith, the wide receiver. I take it as back in the day, Stephen, if Michael Jordan's going to score 31, 32 points a game and you double him and you get him to 24, 25 points a game, there's 6 points that someone else is going to have to take up where with the Bulls. Someone else is, and usually they'd find somebody, whether it was Kerr or Pippen or Luke Longley, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
Michael's going to get his points. So Jeremiah might get a couple receptions here, but taking him away and then having someone else be the one to have to step up, that would be a key in Notre Dame's coaching philosophy and how we're going to slow them down. We're going to try to I'd rather the tight end beat us than this wide receiver who is averaging 17 yards of reception.
Absolutely. Because as I say, it's a team game. It's not, it's 22 starters and 60 players and a coaching staff and a fan base. I mean, there's a lot goes into these victories. Ohio State, now they knocked off Oregon 2 weeks ago, just really played the game of their lives. And they played an impressive victory over Texas, but it was this close to going to overtime or having the game come down to the last couple of minutes. Texas was knocking on the door and they were down to 2, and then Ohio State stepped up with a fantastic goal line stand. There was a great tackle to set Texas back to about the 9 or 10 yard line, and then there was this incredible. Well, it was a fumble and a run down the field that clinched the game. So it's a nice victory, but it was close. Now you also talk about how does a underdog team win? You mentioned 2006 at the Rose Bowl. I was at that game. I'm there with my daughter. I also talked about 86. Anybody who's a Miami fan who's going to watch that game is going to point to play after play, 5 or 6 plays that went Penn State's way, mainly 4 interceptions against Testaverde, who was the Heisman winner and just suddenly forgot how to play football that day.
Right.
Those are the kinds of things. You look at the Texas SC game. We get off to the lead. We're ahead 7-0. I turn to my daughter. I go, we're gonna wipe the floor with these guys. She goes, I know. And I'm sitting next to a Texas guy, and he's almost apologizing, like, well, it was a nice run. And I have a DVD of that game, and I've watched that game over, and I've dissected it and gone over it with my USC friends. And again, there are 6 or 7 plays that any number of those plays that didn't happen and didn't go Texas's way, sometimes by inches, the game probably is won by USC, which was eventually, it was won by 3 points at the last 9 seconds by Texas. It is, as Al Pacino calls it, a game of inches. So I think a lot, we got the Reggie Bush lateral in the middle of the field. You've got this crazy interception that Matt Leinart threw where the guy just barely even caught it in bounds. You've got a Texas running back who probably in the replay era would have been called back because his knee hit the ground, but they didn't call it. And then you've got some key mistakes by USC, particularly at the end, a pass interference call, on a 3rd and long, with the ball at the midfield with only a minute to go. And so that's what Notre Dame's going to need. They're going to need everything to go right, every little. So that's just a matter of not making mistakes. And then I don't think it's luck. I think Branch Rickey said that luck is is when preparation meets preparation meets design, or something along those lines. So that's how they're going to have to approach this game. But it's not impossible.
Luck favors the exceptionally well prepared. It is another way of putting that. I think the Irish are built to play a team like Ohio State in a way that others weren't. They're big where they need to be big. They're faster than I thought they were, especially with their linebackers. They don't have to get pressure from their big guys. Their linebackers, their edge rushers can get to the quarterback. Their cornerbacks are exceptional. Their back safeties can play. They're a very good football team. So I thought this was going to be a Monte Teo team against Alabama, where they just didn't have anywhere close to the talent that Alabama did. And for a national championship, it was a blowout. But I think the Irish are better prepared for that. I know they're hurting, and that's one of the things that if this game were being played in Miami, like the Orange Bowl, my first game this year, the Falcons were in Miami for a preseason game. There were 3 guys, 2 Falcons and 1 Dolphin, that blew their knee out in almost non-contact injuries. And there was a game just at the end of the year. It wasn't with the University of Miami, but it might have been one of the bowl games. But it wasn't the Orange Bowl. And I see 2 players within a quarter blow their knees out. I'm not blaming it on the surface, but you have to just take the obvious into effect that that's going to be different. I don't think you'll have the same surface issues here in Atlanta, but you never know how these 18 to 22-year-old kids are going to react. Some are going to rise to the top, and others might just be a little nervous and they drop the ball or they miss the tackle. So all of that comes into play. But Logan, your final thoughts here before we move on, just your college football playoff, the season itself, just sum it up in a couple of sentences and what this game will end up doing for your appreciation and love for the game.
I mean, it's been a great season, I think, overall. We've seen teams who, coming into the year, we never would have thought would have had winning records, would have made it to the playoffs. I mean, look at Arizona State. Great coaches get some shine. We've seen upsets like you always do. We've seen dominant teams like Oregon, who ran the table, right? Was undefeated all regular season. And then here comes Ohio State and took them down a peg. But I think also too, I know we spoke about it the other day, Harper, but I'm a big fan after seeing all these games now, except for obviously the national championship, of the 12-team format. It wouldn't surprise me if they up it to 14 or 16 within the next year or two, honestly. I'm excited to see how the ratings are going to do. I think they're going to be through the roof, but I've been a big fan of this college football season. There's been a lot of hype around it too, with the NIL, the transfer portal. That's added just another factor to everything. But what a great way this season's been. We finally get to set it and end it on hopefully a high note with a great competitive game come up on Monday night between the Ohio State Buckeyes and Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Can't wait to see how these two teams are going to do.
And Stephen, to piggyback off of that, from a historical standpoint, not just 5 or 10 years, 100 years from now, when they say they changed the format, at least in Division I, to where they played in a playoff that's similar to Division II or III, they're going to have a tournament now. The very first one ended up with 2 of the most storied franchises. So from a historical standpoint, the teams that made it, like Michigan had won the national championship, they would certainly be a historical team. SC, of course, but could you ask for a better script between these 2 great schools and the history of their football teams and the successes that they've had to be the ones to represent here on this very first effort for the playoff?
No, you couldn't. I guess the only better one from my standpoint, if you're looking at either, I don't know, Alabama versus USC or USC versus Notre Dame, you're talking about the 3 schools with the most national championships. If you were going to do like an AP top 25 for the history of collegiate football, it's probably Alabama and then Notre Dame, USC, Ohio State, But you're also looking at who Ohio State beat to get here. I mean, they beat a good, solid Tennessee team, SEC team that had a lot of fans come to that game, and Ryan Day was on the hot seat. Then they beat the number 1, as Logan said, unbeaten Oregon. And then they beat a great Texas team. But Notre Dame, they beat Indiana, they beat an SEC opponent, Georgia, and they beat a strong Big Ten team, Penn State. Both teams have earned their way in. Logan, can you tell me the name of the Ohio State lineman who picked up that fumble and ran it?
Yep, that was Jack Sawyer.
Jack Sawyer.
Okay, yeah. I read in I think it was the Wall Street Journal that he lost his breath around the 50. He didn't think he was going to make it, and he wasn't even going to be tackled. But he thought he was just running with his eyes closed, like, don't fall, don't drop the ball. I mean, he just wasn't prepared for that, but he made it. So that was his moment in the sun for sure.
Well, oddly enough, Stephen, that was his second fumble return for a touchdown in the year. So, he didn't want the turf monster or anything like that to be able to trip him up. But we spoke about him in our draft prospect show yesterday. He certainly will get a little bit of a pay raise because of that in terms of his draft status and where he goes in the NFL. Great moments they've had. I think there'll be some great moments in this football game, and I certainly hope it is a barn burner, as Keith Jackson would say. And, an exciting game to watch and goes right down to the end. That would make it just all the sweeter for no matter who wins.
Yep, that's what we hope for. We don't want our blowout here. We don't want a Georgia TCU rematch from a couple of years ago. We don't want that.
Yeah.
If you go back in Ohio State football history, I believe the game that sort of put their program on the map was a game against Notre Dame in 1935. I don't have it in front of me, but I think I saw that in a book called What It Means to Be a Fighting Irish. So maybe that's a game they'll be talking about.
Well, talking about it, being able to go, Vincent told us a story that he was at a restaurant and there were 4 people that were from Ohio. They didn't have tickets yet. They just saved up for this game. They didn't go to the previous ones on purpose, waiting and saving out. I can't imagine what the credit card companies are going to look like for the people that have made the trips out and the expenses involved. I'm sure there'll be some stories that might be book-worthy in terms of what people were able to do to support their team or just to be a part of this historical ball game. But again, that'll be 7:30 kickoff here in Atlanta Monday evening at Mercedes-Benz Arena. Let's
want to hear a story about?
Please do. Yeah,
about
absolutely.
That kind of thing. We all know Mike McDowd. He's been on your show. He's one of my best friends. So in January 2017, the championship game was played at Levi Stadium in Santa Clara. And at the last minute, Mike, who was actually living in my house, at about 3:00 in the afternoon, he says, "Come on, let's go. Let's go. How many times is a national title game could be played in our backyard? Let's go. I'll drive." Okay. So we drove down to Santa Clara. We get to Santa Clara. We are walking around. Now, I've many times bought scalper tickets, but by 2017, it was a whole new paradigm. There weren't any scalper tickets. It's all on your phone. It's all done, that way. And there wasn't anybody walking around with got to, need to. That just wasn't happening. So we end up at this hotel and we're sitting there and the game starts. And the Tua Tagovailoa family, I'm probably butchering his name. They're a huge Polynesian family, and there must have been 12 of them. And they're sitting next to us, and we're talking to them. And one of them mentions they've got 2 tickets. And, well, how come you're not using? Oh, well, I'm here with my daughter. I don't see her that much. So we're just enjoying the game here, He transferred the tickets to Mike. We walked into that. We gave him some dough for a lot less than normally you'd pay, and walked in about the second quarter and saw the game. It was a big Clemson victory with the great quarterback Lawrence over Alabama. So that was that we lucked out for sure.
Yeah. Luck favors the exceptionally well prepared. Yes, I said that, but no, that was luck. Are you kidding me? For you to just randomly run into the Tagovailoa family? Oh yeah, I got a couple. I don't even want to go. Oh my gosh!
It's all it's all Mike, because when Mike is anywhere, he just becomes best friends with everybody. Yep. He's talking to these people. Oh yeah, you're Tua's cousin. Yeah, that's great. He becomes your best friend. And you want to do him favors. I mean, that's just Mike McDowd. That
is amazing. And then you missed a quarter, maybe 17, 18 minutes of the ball game, but you got to go. You had a destination, and even though you weren't there at kickoff, you were there for everything else. That is awesome. Yeah. That is awesome. Well, I may end up going down to Atlanta with Logan, and we're going to try to see if we can't hook up with the Palomalo family or someone else that might have a couple of tickets.
Woody Hayes' grandson will be there.
It doesn't matter. Anybody. Yeah, we'll take it. All right, well, let's switch over to the NFL, guys. Let's do real quick. Last weekend was great. A lot of good games, but there were some blowouts in my understanding of just how this playoff works, and to see new blood, new teams, for example, Denver, the Commanders in Washington, and for them to get the win, the Chargers. And by the way, Harbaugh, I saw him in that game against Houston. They had one quick shot of him, and he didn't look good, if you know what I mean. He just, something was wrong. And so he's going to have a procedure done on his heart, and he's also going to get his hip replaced. The way he was leaned over with his hands on his knees, looking down with his headset on, during the game in a timeout, I said, dude, that guy's back is bothering him. I don't know if it's his sciatica or that guy's in pain. And he didn't. And then I saw him limp off, kind of jogging at halftime. And I go, yeah. So for me to get that news that he was going to, get some things worked on, good for you, Jim. Get healthy again. Absolutely. But tough loss in Houston. Houston now, the reward for them is they get to go to Kansas City. There won't be any tickets for Kansas City fans. I can guarantee you that. But first and foremost, Stephen, give us your thoughts here. Chiefs with a week off, probably needed the rest, maybe not as much as the Lions, but will that extra rest help propel them to an early 400 or 500-point game, or is it going to be something that might slow them down a little bit, and Houston might be ready for them this time?
Well, I didn't predict that the Chargers would beat Houston last week. I more or less was saying from a fan standpoint, I would like to see them do it. And then for a brief period, they were up 6-0. And I thought, maybe Travers is on to something. But Stroud played a creditable game. Mainly there were turnovers, and there was a lot of good defense that played by the Texans, and it just overwhelmed the Chargers. They do have a good defensive team. They're going to be up against it, dealing with Mahomes and that great offense that the Chiefs have. They're going to be playing at Arrowhead Stadium in very difficult atmosphere. It's going to be very hard for Houston to get past the Chiefs. I think Kansas City is going to have their way with them.
Yeah, Logan, how about you? Is there any way that the offensive line for the Texans is able to push and pull and shove and be able to get the running game going for the Texans, which they will absolutely have to have in terms of maintaining ball control, possession, keeping the sticks moving, things like that you've got to do to beat a team like Kansas City, controlling the clock?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, you've got to kind of do all the small things in this game if you're Houston. Also, too, just a point too that pretty much this is 2 weeks off for the Chiefs because a lot of their starters didn't play in their final game of the regular season. So, I mean, they're well rested, right? And hopefully they don't come out to a flat start. That's obviously the one risk you have when guys take some extended time off. But like I said, they could come out fresher. We just don't know it yet. CJ Stroud's going to have pretty much the performance he had against the Chargers, if not better, because we know this Kansas City Chiefs defense is no joke. Joe Mixon had a really good performance. He's going to have to duplicate that and just be even better because we know that the Texans, just their receiving core, pretty much outside of Nico Collins, is banged up. A lot of their stars aren't there. They've been on the IR for most of the season, but they found a way to get it done. We know they were kind of struggling a little bit getting into the playoffs, but obviously an impressive win over a game Chargers team last week kind of lifted the spirits as well. So I think that the Chiefs will take this one, but I think the Texans are going to put up a really good fight. And it's just unfortunate they're not fully healthy for this game because I feel like if you had, your Tank Dells, your Stephon Diggs, it would be a lot closer of a game offensively. But I that Kansas City defense is bar none, one of the best in the league, just with all the playmakers they have. And plus, you've got Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, who we've seen time and time again can just get it done. So I think the Chiefs will take it in this one.
Well, real quick, let's stick with you, Logan. Talk about getting it done. Washington certainly did while going to Tampa, but at what price? That was one of the more physical games that I've seen all year. Their defense especially, they were knocking people out all over the place, but are they banged up against another team that we already know that's banged up? The defense there for the Lions has had countless, 12, 13, 14 different guys have been on IR or missed game time. We've teased before that if you were working at a Foot Locker in the Detroit area, be ready for a phone call because the general manager of the Lions might be looking to bring you in for a tryout because of all the guys that they've gone down. So give us a quick overview of Washington visiting Detroit there. What time is that? It's an 8 o'clock game at Fox. So it's a late Saturday game. That may not be over till midnight Eastern time.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, just respect to Washington for the year they've had, picking number 2 in the draft, right? And then winning their first playoff game since 2006 against a very solid Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that, we've covered on the channel a lot this season, being in the same division as the Falcons. Baker Mayfield putting up a tremendous, I'm sure he'll garner a couple of MVP votes this year. At least I know Vincent Turner will give him one if that's an accredited one. But I think that for me, the main factor that's is going to be the home field advantage for Detroit. We know the fans are just rabid out there in Detroit. I know we always talk about Philly. We will in a minute, but the Detroit fans, they've been waiting forever. We saw the fireworks they had last year, and this year they've just been willing this team. Dan Campbell's one of the best motivators, let alone coaches, in the game right now. So, like you said, I get half their roster. It feels like it's on the couch right now. It's been icing up for weeks and weeks on end, but they just find a way to get it done, and that's what good teams do. We always say this isn't an individual sport. This is a team game. And the Lions are a very solid, well put together team. And that's a credit to the coaching staff for having them prepared every week, for the front office for getting the right players on the team. And right now they're just clicking on all cylinders. So I think this one's going to be a really good game, honestly. But I will go with the Detroit Lions and Jared Goff taking home the win in this one out there in Detroit.
Stephen, as an author, there may be a great story here that still is yet to be written about Detroit. First, give me your impressions. What do you think of Washington? And then do they have what it takes to take on a team that last year, remember, they go into San Francisco and they give the 49ers everything they had to handle. What do they take from last year's loss to build on putting themselves in position to get in the Super Bowl this year?
Well, they have an experienced quarterback who's been around, and he has something to prove. He's, a former Heisman winner who has been in the league for, 10 years or so. And, he's good and he's a starter, and this is his chance. Now he's up against the young buck, Jared Goff. And this is his story. Now this is personal to me. I know Jared, I know his dad. So that's the team I'm rooting for, but they are 15-2. They are tied with the best record in all of professional football with Kansas City. I think it really looks like a matchup of the two best teams, Kansas City versus Detroit in the Super Bowl, the two best quarterbacks, the two best records. And I know Detroit has a lot of injuries, especially on defense, but Goff is healthy, and he is a guy who knows how to play under pressure. Now, you mentioned last year that Washington played the 49ers tough, and they're going to learn something from that. Well, the exact same thing.
Detroit, not Washington, Detroit.
Oh, well, well, actually, you said Washington.
Did I say what? I misspoke then. Please forgive me.
And I was a little bit confused. So now I'm getting to your point.
I have the power to make people not know what the heck I'm saying. I apologize for that. So.
Yeah, because I'm making your point in a roundabout way. It's Detroit who was ahead of the 49ers well into that game, and then did not produce in the second half. So if you're Dan Campbell and you are Jared Goff and you're the offensive line and the offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions, you probably have spent a lot of time looking at film and asking yourself, what did we do wrong? How do we correct it? How do we apply that this year? Because that's that small measure, that little area in sports. And this is the beauty of sports, the difference between a champion and not a champion. And many times you can ask the 1972 Miami Dolphins, why were you so good? Why did you win? And they say, well, because we were beaten by the Dallas Cowboys soundly in the Super Bowl the previous year, and Don Shula and Bob Greasy and all those guys got together and they looked at what was missing. What are the components that were missing in 1971 that they need in 1972? And I think that's where Dan Campbell and Jared Goff and the Lions are this year. I think they are the team of destiny.
Yeah, there's a truth to that. We're never going to let that happen again. And the Super Bowl lost by the Dolphins, and then for the next 2 years, they pretty much dominate. They're undefeated. Then they win another Super Bowl the following year. Interesting points. Thank you for bringing that up. Real quick for both of you. Logan, I'm going to give you credit for this because you brought this to my attention yesterday. Stephen, so I'll ask you, are there two franchises that are happier than a pig and poo than the Ram and Lion organizations that swapped their quarterbacks a few years ago and still are going, we're fine? That's one of the greatest trades where both teams benefited better than any other that I can think of. You give Goff and Stafford a different light, a different coach, a different environment to be in, a different team, and look at how they both excelled.
Absolutely. That's a very good point. Obviously, Stafford has taken the Rams to a Super Bowl. The Rams made a decision. They had an older team. They had Aaron Donald was their key guy on defense, and they were a veteran team. There's a couple ways that you go after victory in professional sports. Either you build with youth, or you go for it. You say, okay, maybe this is a one-year team, and we're going to try to win the Super Bowl this year. Now, the Rams accomplished that. Stafford was their quarterback. Since then, they've had some down times. But if you're a Ram fan, you're going to say, it's worth it because we did win that Super Bowl. That's sometimes a trade-off. You'd love to have a dynasty where you do it 3-4 years in a row like the Chiefs, but they do have that, so it was worth it. So they've built back from that. They don't have Donald anymore. Of course, the Rams have a little bit of a backstory going on, and that's the fires in Los Angeles. One have to imagine that a lot of either players or people who in their organization lost homes. I mean, that's a place where a lot of people live, and it's close to their practice field. It's just right over the hill from, or is it Woodland Hills, I think, is where their practices are. So that, could they be like LSU or the New Orleans Saints when, they won championships and did it for a region after Hurricane Katrina? It certainly would bring a few smiles to the faces of people in Los Angeles, and they could sure use some smiles on their faces. Now, their victory over Minnesota, we talked about that. The LA Times had an article about the history of the Viking-Ram rivalry, which we spoke of last week, which was a great rivalry and had these incredible games played, usually in snow, in the early 70s, late 60s. And then later, when there were some games at the Coliseum, the Rams got some retribution. So you look at Sam Darnold. Now, we've talked about the teams that have a bye in the first round, and it really didn't work in collegiate football. In fact, it roundly did not work. So the Kansas City Chiefs, they more or less, as Logan said, had a bye for 2 weeks because they really didn't play their starters in the last week of the regular season. But we have seen that teams can come out of the gate a little rocky when that happens, despite the fact that you say, and any coach would want a week, 2 weeks extra to prepare. Minnesota did not get that. They were beaten by the Lions fairly soundly, and this was Sam Darnold's chance to shine. And here's a guy who was a very good college player, and he's been, like Baker Mayfield, a pro with several different teams. It wasn't his day. He had some turnovers, and the Rams, I mean, are they a team of destiny because of the situation they're in? It would be an absolute upset to go into a place like Philadelphia and win. I'm not predicting it to happen, but I think there's some rooting interest in that regard.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how we teased about the Philadelphia fan not caring at all about the fires because they're too busy throwing hot dog wrappers at the back of the heads of the Ram players. That's their welcome to Philadelphia story. What do the Eagles need to do? Logan, they've got a great offensive line. They've got a really good defense. And then they got this guy, Saquon Barkley. I've heard of him. I don't know what he's done. They can beat you in so many different realms. But if Jalen Hurts has a good game throwing the ball, how do they lose? How is it possible?
Yeah, that's the main thing is how is Jalen Hurts going to perform? We saw that, yes, they did beat the Packers 22-10, but Jalen Hurts didn't look, razor sharp. He struggled at times. He missed some passes that normally he would complete. But overall, he's done a very productive day. Saquon Barkley, boy, don't you think the Giants are kicking themselves right now for giving him up and just seeing how better he's gotten over the year and how he's leading this team into the playoffs. But obviously Saquon's going to do what he's pretty much done all season, is that's get 100-something yards and get a touchdown or two. And that's pretty much the day for him. But I'm expecting Devontae Smith to do some good work at the receiving core. A.J. Brown, he'll read his book on the sideline, then he'll catch a couple passes. So I think the offense for the Eagles will be good. Like I said, the defense, though, they held Jordan Love in check, 3 interceptions on the day. So they are looking good right now. But Kobe Dean, as I mentioned, he is out. He's going to be out for the rest of the playoffs due to a knee injury. So that's a big linebacker that you're missing on your team that hopefully you can have someone fill in and help out with a guy down on the injured reserve at this time. But I think Philly's got a good chance of getting this one. It just depends for me personally. How is Jalen Hurts going to perform? Is he going to be like he was last week against Green Bay? Or will he, perform a little bit better? But this is a really solid game, like you said. Obviously, not a lot of people thought, rather, LA would dominate the Vikings like that, getting 9 sacks. I mean, I never would have saw that coming. I know Sam Darnold's glad that's over finally, but I think that this is going to be a good matchup here. But I think I'll go with the slight edge, go with the Eagles getting this one. But if they don't, then Steven, I might be having to get a ticket to that movie you're saying with this Rams team, because it wouldn't shock me at all if they beat these Phillies, especially at home in Philadelphia. What an upset that would be.
Yeah, no kidding. To bring it back home and then to be able to, well, then you got to probably go to Detroit. Here's another thing. Final game that we're going to look at. This is Buffalo hosting Baltimore. This is a doubleheader game for me. And I'm going to call it a doubleheader because you got to beat the guy in front of you. And then most likely, then you got to go to Kansas City. So that's your reward for winning this game, is that you got to go take on the Chiefs, who everyone is saying with only 2 losses, this is the most average blah, blah, 15-win team that we've ever seen. No, they're the Kansas City Chiefs. So whoever comes away with this, gets the honor of having Muhammad Ali or Mike Tyson in the next fight that you got to take in order to win the belt and get the championship. But both these teams have been building for years to be able to get to this spot. The loser, they're going to pull their hair out and go, how do we possibly lose to these guys? But Steven, give me your thoughts here about Buffalo at home hosting against the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, this is a heavyweight matchup between 2 of the best quarterbacks, and I'm looking at this field here, and you guys, maybe you can come up with a better year, or more about it than I do, but I know a little bit about it, and I'm not sure I've ever seen so many good quarterbacks in their primes. Look at all these great quarterbacks. You got Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. You got Patrick Mahomes. You got Stroud, who's a pretty good quarterback. You have we get back to I'm a fan of Jalen Hurts, and you mentioned Hurts and Barkley. I think if those guys can get to a Super Bowl, win a Super Bowl, that might get both those guys into the Hall of Fame. Barkley's probably already in there. Hurts is kind of knocking on the door. Who else is knocking on the door? Goff is knocking on the door.
Stafford.
Yeah.
Stafford's in.
Darnold had a good year. Mayfield is making a comeback. It's a lot of really top quarterbacks playing in the National Football League right now. It's not one of those years where like the Baltimore Ravens won it with Trent Dilfer and Ray Lewis tackling everybody and winning the game 6-3. So it's an exciting time. Now, Buffalo's the team I saw. I witnessed them play at home. So I don't think it's as cold on the East Coast as it was a week ago. But it's Buffalo and it's January. So that is, I think the Bills, just because they know that field and they have their home fans, and boy, you also talk about the teams that have fan bases and have not won. And we're looking at several, but in particular, I'm looking at the Detroit Lions and the Buffalo Bills, 2 teams. The Bills have won an AFL title, never a Super Bowl. The Lions won an NFL title in 1957 with, Bobby Lane drinking beer on the sidelines. Actually, I think they were trailing the 49ers by 21 at the half and then rallied. I think Lane probably sobered up. But Just joking a little bit.
Yeah, all he had to do was hand it off to Doak Walker and let Doak do everything.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's so many great possibilities here. You've got the Goff Mahomes possibility, but look at who you got all these MVP candidates, Jackson, Allen, and Goff. And so no matter who gets in, it's going to be a battle of great young quarterbacks or quarterbacks in their prime, really. And so Allen is playing the football of his life. So I like his chances. And then he's going to be up against probably Mahomes. It's really been a great year for football. It's been a good year for me to join your program because both college and pro football is really exciting this year. And it's kind of doing this has really revived a lot of my interest.
Well, thank you for that. And Logan, on top of that, Stephen brings up a really good point in how important it is for your franchise to have the type of a quarterback that can put you in a position where you're moving forward in the playoffs. And there's 12, 14, 16 teams that have good quarterbacks, but they're not at the level where they're going to get you to where you've been playing in February. And interesting point here, just in Atlanta, or if you go to New Orleans, the Raiders, the Bears. Bears have a great quarterback, but they don't have the things around him to be able to be talking about his status here on the show in late January. So very interesting point there. But we've got two great ones between Buffalo and Baltimore. Give us your impressions here on the game itself.
Yeah, like you said, doubleheader pretty much here because whoever wins this game is more than likely we all think is going to go against the Kansas City Chiefs. So, I mean, that's not an easy task, obviously, but someone's going to go home disappointed, obviously, because both these teams were expected to make a deep playoff run, not get knocked out in the divisional round. And unfortunately for one of them, it's going to be that case. For years, we've seen, we've heard the narrative of Lamar Jackson is tremendous in the regular season. Multi-time MVP, might get one again this year, but he just can't get it done in the playoffs. And for Josh Allen and his company, well, the Grim Reaper, will say, is up there in Arrowhead in Kansas City. That's just been their kryptonite for years now. So, I mean, this is a toss-up here. This is going to be – the AFC is just so stacked right now. If you just compare the two conferences, I mean, the AFC, you've got – tremendous numbers, like great guys, right? Great teams. But the NFC is kind of just like a ragtag bunch of teams a little bit of guys who, we didn't think would even be here. Like, I'm sure no one outside of Washington thought that at the beginning of the year that they would be in the divisional round at this moment. I don't think anyone outside of that fan base thought that. The Rams have been a good story, but man, this is just you could go flip a coin 50 times and it'll be 50-50 with or 25-25 with both these teams here. That's how good they are. I mean, for every strength one team has, the other one has pretty much the exact same. Great quarterback play, good defense. I'd say the one factor though is the running game for Baltimore. If Derrick Henry can run like we've seen him do, on top of that, Lamar Jackson. Look, we know that Josh Allen can run and truck people when needed. But to me, the key for Buffalo to win this game is going to be, is James Cook going to have the performance he had against Denver when he ran for 100-plus yards? That's going to be the big factor for me because we know that Buffalo has a good team, but I think that I'll give the slight edge to Baltimore in this one. But this is going to be, for me, the game of the week here in terms of the NFL, because this is going to be just a knock-em-out brawl. I think a very close game in this one, 3 to 7 points, hopefully, and hopefully for some good football.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see whether or not the simplicity of Baltimore rising now with their defense playing better, with Lamar playing with a purpose, with him playing better in the playoffs, then he's kind of choked for a while, and now I think he's got everything together. And then obviously the ace up their sleeve is their running game, and they can run, and no matter what the weather is. With Derrick Henry, who wouldn't want to have that guy on their roster? So I think the test will be Baltimore, or the Buffalo. Can they respond to what Baltimore offers in terms of their roster? Do they have what it takes to get past this hurdle before they go take on that second half of the doubleheader? Well, we'll find out here in the next couple of days. What a busy, busy weekend it is. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, all very important. Endings of the season for the NFL is approaching, but the end of the season for the college. Logan, let's final thoughts here on a Friday, Saturday. I'm sorry, a Sunday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday weekend lineup. Boy, if you're a football fan at all, if you like pigskins, this is a great place to be.
Harper, I'll steal a line from you. Get your honey-do list out of the way. You have to. Any chores you got, any commitments you have, try to get them done early. Because, like you said, there's a lot of football on a lot of different days now. It's not just Saturday and Sunday. No, it's pretty much the entire weekend now, plus Monday. So it's going to be some great games. Excited to see. Obviously, the NFL games taking place this weekend. Who's going to be moving on to the conference championships? A lot of really good matchups, interesting matchups here. And then, of course, the guys in college, Notre Dame and Ohio State get their time to shine in Atlanta. All eyes on them. So that's going to be hopefully a great game there. But man, we have some tremendous football action lined up for you for the next handful of days. And I can't wait to watch it this weekend and talk about it again next week with you guys.
Stephen, summarize the show here today.
Yeah, you're 100% right. If you love football, this is as good as it gets. And we were talking about like when you're a little kid, you've got that excitement, and so that's been brought to the country. I think the winner is collegiate football, because in the past, collegiate football was done about a week ago, and so now it's just the pros, and they suck up all the oxygen, and Alabama's won, or LSU's won, or Georgia or Ohio State has won, and it's great if you're in Columbus or wherever you are. But it's kind of forgotten. But the colleges are still in the discussion, well into January. And without taking anything away from the pros, the winner is people like us who like football, whether it's professional or college. So it's a fantastic week to be able to see all these great pro teams, and then see two more great pro teams like the Irish and the Buckeyes. The Buckeyes with their $20 million roster, but it's all good.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've got a Take 5 show with Stephen Travers, and there's 5 games here this weekend, 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday, and the collegiate final, the 5th game here this weekend will be on Monday evening. Again, a 7:30 kick here from Atlanta on ESPN. But there's a lot to certainly celebrate and enjoy, and you'll get angry and want to throw something soft like a cotton ball at your expensive $200 and $300 television, 60 inches, whatever it is. Keep that safe for the next show that you want to see. But nonetheless, a great football weekend. So we want to thank you for being a part of the show here today, and thank you for giving us a few moments of your time to pay homage and to honor Bob Uecker, who died earlier today. And we had some baseball stories, and obviously his connection with the media, with broadcasting, with commercials, with television, and with movies, certainly unsurpassed. What a unique and special individual Bob Uecker was, and for his contribution to baseball itself, we wanted to take a moment to let him know let you all know what he meant to us. So thank you for that as well. So for Stephen Travers, for Logan Landers, our producer and engineer, I'm Harper LaBelle. We want to say thank you for tuning in to 100 Yards of Football. This has been Take 5 with Stephen Travers. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.